The murder of 3 young Muslim Americans in North Carolina. Closer to home, a number of recent anti-Muslim incidents, including death threats and racist graffiti scrawled on bathroom stalls at Sandburg High School in Orland Park. Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate crimes appear to be on the rise both locally and across the country. Here with some insights on the scale of the problem and what can be done to address it, Deanna Othman is a freelance journalist who recently wrote an article for the Chicago Tribune titled, "Will Muslims Ever Be Part and Parcel of America?" Ahmed, Rehab, Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, Chicago office, the council also known as CAIR, is the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy group, and Renda Kuzez of Faith Youth Corps, which aims to promote cooperation and bridge building between faiths to promote religious pluralism. Ms. Kuzez was in Chapel Hill at the time the murders took place and attended a vigil for the victims. And welcome all to Chicago tonight. Renda, if I can begin with you, tell me what that experience was like when you were in North Carolina when those murders took place.
Yeah, so...
Or when those killings took place.
Yeah, the day Dia and Razan and Yusr were killed, I was sitting with a group of students at Wake Forest University talking about their experiences on campus. 24 hours later, we were on a bus together, headed to the vigil and the funeral.
And here we're looking at the picture of the 3 victims. And tell us what that vigil and funeral was like. What was the general tone of it?
It was such a powerful experience to be there with 6,000 people that were mourning together, but also talking about the beautiful lives, the exemplary lives that they led. I mean, the last Facebook post that Dia had was him serving food to the homeless population and free dental services in downtown Raleigh. Some of the students on the bus with me were at their wedding just 6 weeks prior and talked about what an amazing, beautiful experience that was. And just to them, hearing their stories showed me what exemplary models they were of Muslim values and American values. And their loss was really felt across the globe.
Deanna, that incident prompted you to write a column, and it was entitled, "Will Muslims Ever Be Accepted as Americans?" Now with it's been a few weeks since it happened. Your thoughts about that incident and the question it raises?
Mm-hmm. I think as Muslim Americans, we've been working so hard in order to feel that we're part of America and will be viewed as American citizens.
You were born in the Chicago area, and Renda, you were born in St. Louis. But go ahead.
We see ourselves as Americans. We've been educated in America. We have, we work. We have. Our children attend schools. We don't see ourselves as separate from the society until something like this happens. And then we see that these young, beautiful individuals who, as Renda said, were not just ordinary, they were extraordinary. And that something such as their faith could lead them to be victims of a hate crime. And even the reluctance of it being labeled as a hate crime and the myriad of reasons that we've seen surrounding the issue lead us to believe, well, maybe we aren't seen as part of America. Maybe we are seen as, the other, quote unquote. And so we continue to kind of grapple with this issue within our communities.
You're talking about it very logically, and yet, as I read the column, there was also a lot of pain in that column.
Definitely, because I don't see myself as not American. American is who I am. Obviously, I have other cultural backgrounds. My parents are Palestinian, but I have never known, any other country but America. And so for my Americanness to be questioned, it makes no sense to me, because what right does anyone have to question my Americanness because of the way I dress, because of my faith? Those things should be irrelevant.
How about it, Ahmed? Is there a rise in Islamophobia?
There has been a rise in Islamophobia that has spiked since 9/11 and then on and off depending on essentially what's in the news. We've seen upticks of incidents of hate crimes and bias crimes both in Chicagoland area and around the country. And really the question that you asked Deanna and that she wrote about in her article isn't a question of whether we are part of America or not. I mean, that, the jury's out on that one. There's no question about that. We are an integral part of the American experience. Nothing in our faith prevents us from being so. Nothing in the Constitution prevents us from being so. The question is, will those who are loath to believe it come to believe it as they interact with us and as we educate and raise awareness?
And if you wouldn't mind, just share some of the experiences that you have had. I mean, the fact that you both dress as identifiable followers of Islam in everyday life, what does that raise any issues?
Well, for me, it really doesn't. I just feel Like, this is just an extra piece that I add on to my daily wardrobe. I think the challenge comes when, you know, sometimes we might hear something that challenges us, or you know, go
Such
back
as?
to your country. One time, you know, at a track meet, someone said to me, "Why are you wearing that thing on your head anyway? You don't look like you belong here." And one of my friends, thankfully, stood up for me and said, "We shouldn't speak like that to each other. We're all one people." But
A non-Muslim friend?
yes, a Christian friend. And I think that it was really powerful to see that. But before that, I hadn't really thought about what it means for me to wear this hijab on my head and be called out for it.
Deanna, your experiences?
I think that as a Muslim woman who wears hijab, I'm very confident in wearing it. I don't like second guess my choice, or I don't feel that, you know, I should be questioned about it. But at the same time, I do feel pressure in terms of the way that I behave in public, the way that I'm perceived is automatically attached to my identity as a Muslim.
And how does that create pressure for you?
So no matter what situation I'm in, no matter you know, what context it's in, I'm always going to be viewed through the lens of my faith, right? Through my faith identity. So whether it's some everyday occurrence, you know, people make missteps, whether it's while they're driving, you know, they cut somebody off, they run a stop sign. When people see me, they immediately recognize my faith, and I feel that it gives people this sort of temerity to insult me with, you know, racial or ethnic or religious slurs. Whereas if it's somebody else, they're not necessarily judged, you know, based on their appearance or what they're associated with. When it's something out of that context, it's not in a political or religious or a cultural context.
Ahmed, how about the role of the media in contributing to Islamophobia or in ameliorating it?
I think it's a critical question, and I think there's a lion's share when it comes to the media, because if you think about it, the average American has not been to Syria or Iraq or Libya or Yemen or Somalia or anywhere where these things are happening, but they're in Naperville or Bridgeview or Oaklawn watching their television sets. So really they depend almost 100% on the media to carry those news headlines over. And the problem is if they're not contextualized and scoped appropriately. In other words, if there is the insinuation that these aberrant experiences of terrorism and radicalism are somehow representative of the normative experience of Muslims worldwide, then you're going to have these people who really don't have much, you know, interaction with Muslims anyway, look at Muslims here as an extension of the problem and begin to retaliate those of them who are prone to do such things.
Because you know, from the media's perspective, you can understand the interest in covering attacks or other crimes when the perpetrators claim Islam as a motivating factor.
And that's not something I'm asking anyone to deny. We're not asking for the stories to be whitewashed. We were only asking for facts to be put on the table. So when you scope things appropriately, yes, that's what they say. But that's not what 95 or 99% of the Muslim world says. In fact, not only do they not say that, but they say the very opposite. They condemn it. They stand up against it. If you look at ISIS, the great overwhelming majority of their victims have been Muslim. The great overwhelming majority of those who fight them and lose their lives fighting them are Muslim. And the great overwhelming majority of those who condemn them around the world are Muslim.
My understanding, too, is that there is often pressure on Muslims to condemn something vocally and overtly, or run the risk of seeming to condone what has happened. Do you feel that pressure? Have you felt it?
Well, at the organization I work, Interfaith Youth Corps, we do a lot of great work in bringing people together across religious and non-religious lines of difference to combat bigotry and to work for cooperation. So in my line of work, I feel like we've done very proactive work to promote people working together. And one thing I wanted to highlight is the Yusr, on her StoryCorps interview, said, it doesn't matter where you come from. There's so many different people from so many different places of different backgrounds and religions, but here we're all one. So her work really exemplifies what I wanted to say that we do at Interfaith Youth Corps in combating bigotry, and she really perfectly described that in her interview.
That was quoted by the President of the United States in his speech about the issue.
What did that mean to you, to hear the President citing that quote?
It's recognition of the fears and aspirations of the Muslim community and really people around the United States who are just not comfortable with the rhetoric of hate that leads to potentially to hate crimes. We need to recognize that it doesn't come out of nowhere, that we need to attack and deal with the atmosphere of hate, whether it's online or whether it's elsewhere, that can feed into having the kook out there actually pick up a gun and shoot somebody. It doesn't come out of nowhere.
It's also